Good morning. Thanks,
Good morning.
everybody. I know we got kind of a slim crowd, but I know we've got some folks online. For you newer members, just remember the beatitude. Blessed are those who are flexible, for you will not break. A lot of things have happened in the last 30 minutes. Todd is wrapped up in a appropriations meeting that he cannot get away from, and he was going to be a lot of what we were going to discuss. And then I may let, just because Bo made the trip over here, might talk about the bill that we were going to talk about tomorrow that we're now not going to talk about. So we'll move right after that, and then we'll hear the commissioner's bill. So I want to volunteer to open us in prayer. Okay. 13, Representative Hill.
Let us pray. Our dear, kind, and gracious Heavenly Father, we ask you, Lord, to forgive us of where we failed you. We just pray, Lord, you lead and guide us in everything that we do, and the outcome would be something that you would be proud of, and that, Lord, we would do your will. We ask for your leadership, your guidance, and your blessing on this meeting, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Thank you. So Sean Marie and I were on the phone at midnight, and then again at 5:45 this morning. I don't know when the girl sleeps, but appreciate all her efforts, not only in quantity, but in quality. So what we're going to do first, for those of you who know or have been talked to about the PEO bill, the EWA bill, the Earned Wages Access Bill, which is an awesome idea. But we have run into some problems with that. So before we start in on the legislation that we're actually going to address, I'm going to have Bo, who's the Deputy Director with the Department of Revenue, come up and explain to us what's going on there. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the invitation to speak before the group today. My name is Bo Fears. I'm the General Counsel and the Deputy Commissioner for Legal Affairs for the Georgia Department of Banking and Finance. The Georgia Department of Banking and Finance, just a little bit of detail about us, since I don't believe I've ever had the opportunity to appear before this committee, is we have two main business lines. The first is supervision. So what we do is we supervise state chartered banks and state chartered credit unions. There's also a corollary on the federal side, right, for national banks and federal credit unions. And we work closely together with our federal counterparts. And there is those are usually fairly complex financial institutions. The other side of our business is the non-depository financial institutions areas. And those are typically what we call sort of monoline businesses, right? So in the residential mortgage space, we regulate mortgage brokers, mortgage lenders, mortgage loan originators. In the money service business space, we regulate money transmitters, sellers of payment instruments, and check cashers. And then we regulate small dollar consumer loans, loans of $3,000 or less.
Time out.
Yep.
A couple people online said they're not hearing you, although the mic says that you're on. Don't know what else to do.
I'll try to stand a little bit closer.
Yeah, stand a little bit closer because it says you're on.
Yeah,
okay.
I move around a lot, so I
okay,
apologize.
Go ahead.
So earned wage access would fall under that non-depository group. And if we look at that group as a whole, it seems to me that the sort of the check cashers are the ones that would be closer to the earned wage access as this bill is designed. So for a check casher, if you have a payroll check and you don't have a bank account, you can go to it. You can go, you've earned your wages. You can go to the check casher. The check casher can charge you a fee and you have your money. Same thing with the earned wage access, right? I've been working, I've earned certain wages. And if this program is put in place, the provider would be able to pull a fee in order to give you access to your funds, your money, in an earlier time period. So that's kind of the closest analogy. In that space, we have more than 24,000 licensees, and we have roughly only 5 employees that handle that. We're able to do that because we utilize a system called the Nationwide Multi-State Licensing System, and it creates uniform requirements throughout all 50 states. And with those efficiencies, we're able to handle that workload. So as it specifically relates to earned wage access, this is taking place in the state of Georgia today, and it has been probably for the last couple of years. The department does not regulate that activity currently. So I don't have any specialized expertise at all. Now, that said, some of these concepts we see frequently. We deal with usury, payday loan type issues. Again, that's illegal in the state of Georgia, so we don't regulate it, but we're aware of these concepts. And so in just looking at this, a couple of things at a real high level kind of jumped out at me. One is at the federal level, the CFPB in December. Get closer, I'm sorry. The CFPB in December of 2020 looked at whether or not this was considered a loan for purposes of federal law. In particular, and I apologize, the CFPB is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It is the federal entity that oversees consumer protection nationally. They addressed whether or not this was considered a loan for purposes of the Truth in Lending Act, and then the rules that implement that, as well as Regulation Z. And the CFPB determined, they said, well, we don't look at what the document is called, if it's called a loan or not. We don't look at the form, but instead we look at the substance. And so it had a laundry list of items that the company was providing. And in this case, it was an order that was issued to pay active. And they said, as long as you have all of these laundry list of items, we won't consider it to be a loan for Proof of Truth in Lending Act purposes. So for example, there was a cap on the amount of fees that could be charged. I believe it was $1 per transaction. You could only access roughly 60% of your earned funds. The individual wasn't going to be individually liable if let's say the individual lost their job in the meantime, the employer didn't pay it. The individual who got access to the funds wouldn't be liable. They're not pulling a credit report, and it goes on and on. And the reason that's important is even in Georgia law, in the usury context, there's a lot of cases that say what you do is you look at the form. You look at the substance of the transaction. You don't look at the form of the transaction. So we've got some direction at the federal level, what they think you need to get out of that loan arena. So I think that would be helpful. Really, and then also sort of from the department's perspective, how this is drafted, we wouldn't really be able to utilize the NMLS. Because we couldn't use that would really impact our efficiencies. And I do not know how many entities would be licensed here or registered here. Could be a handful. It could be a lot. I think what we're seeing, and this kind of falls within the fintech space, financial technology innovation, and you're seeing companies come up with an idea, and then other folks are coming in and kind of backfilling it. So, so that would be a possible occurrence where all of a sudden we're looking at potentially just licensing a handful of these to a significant number. So to the extent it can mirror some of the and just, one easy example is the bill provides the license expires on March 1st. Well, in order to utilize NMLS, it has to be a calendar year license. So that provision, which is incredibly innocuous, would preclude us from utilizing NMLS, and we'd lose some of our efficiencies. Those are just kind of my real quick thoughts on the bill. But if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer that. But I'm more than happy to work with legislative counsel and anyone else that's necessary to try to sort of perfect this bill, if that's the will of the committee.
Did anybody have any questions? Because basically what we're going to do is get this bill over. We've talked to the author and the sponsor. over to Banks and Banking with Greg Morris, and we'll probably make that motion on the floor tomorrow. So both appreciate all your time and involvement. We do have a question, I think. So, is that Robert?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I completely understand we had to shuffle the schedule here, and this one kind of caught me off guard. It wasn't on the agenda, and so I was trying to catch up with the scope of the bill at the same time you were presenting that. So can we take a step back? And I don't know if you're, I imagine you're probably up to date on what this is doing. Can you just give us a higher level of exactly what this is doing, the scope of the bill? And then it sounds like I'm trying to figure out if you're in favor of this or not in favor of this as you're going through and giving all these different.
Let me answer that, because I can put it in layman terms
There we
that us legislators can understand. So basically, if you work for a company and they offer this, and I'm paying you $400 a week, but you don't get paid but every other Friday, and it's Wednesday of this week. So we would, and for the company that brought this bill, they only charge $1 for this. So if you're the employee and I'm the employer, I would say, well, I can give you $200 for $1 is all it will cost you, because it's a benefit, and it's not a loan because it's your money. And the payback, if you'll call it, will be the fact that your check will be $200 less. And then so everything's wiped clean by the next pay period.
Okay, so service fee related with that, and trying to figure out, is this a loan or not? I think that's
Right.
he was talking about. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And his position, as is most agencies, was not for or against, but providing the legal expertise.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. The department does not have a position on the bill.
All right. Okay, we do have some questions. Representative Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if you can, first time doing this virtually. So, yeah, the question is coming from the cloud. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being able to speak to this bill. I was just kind of curious as to whether or not, I know we talked about how, because really this is just an advance with it just, a 60% advance, and, that dollar fee for them to gain access. I know you had mentioned that they would have to basically, you talked about the NMLS and that there might be some licensing. Well, because this is a particularly, I guess this is, it's new, would you have to have maybe some of the bigger companies, let's say north of 500 employees, for them to actually become licensed? Or would you actually have to have a full roster for anybody who would seek to have that system whereby they're giving their employees the advance for them to actually become get registered with the NMLS?
So I think if I could circle back to your first point, the bill as drafted doesn't have any of those limitations. So the bill as drafted, theoretically, instead of charging a fee for $1, someone could charge $20,000, right? I mean, they could eat up their entire amount of their paycheck. There's no limitation. So none of those protections that have been put in by the CFPB in order to ensure that it's not a loan are present in this bill. And I think that's that is something I think that this committee or any committee should give serious consideration to. So from the licensing aspect, we're not licensing the employer. What we're licensing, or what would be out there, is the entity that's offering the service. And so to me, and that's kind of why I tried to make the comparison with check cashers. I appreciate that it's not an exact one-to-one, but really what we're doing is, instead of giving someone their entire paycheck and taking a fee, we're going to give them a portion of their paycheck. It hasn't quite been earned, or it's been earned, but they can't access it in exchange for a fee. And so I think that, and that's something where we have a regulatory process in place, licensing. And the idea is so that that a improper fee, an excessive fee, that is what is not permitted by statute, won't be imposed on the consumer. Hope that answered your question. I'm not sure, but.
No, I mean, it does. And that's fine, because I was wondering, yeah, that takes it out of the space of doing, having everybody be able to, I guess, do licensing. And it's more so that if this bill focuses probably closer in on making sure that that the fee is reasonable and that it's not gouging, then, maybe that'll work.
Right. And I think you're focusing on the providers, right? And so that there would be, I mean, I do not know how many providers are currently in this space. I really do not know that answer. I would assume we're talking less than 100 companies, though, would be my guess.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Representative Kennard.
Yes, thank you. I am also catching up on this bill, got blindsided with it, but it seems to me like this is a de facto payroll loan opportunity, and it could be a workaround on predatory lending. So, because it's not just the employer that has the option, it's now a third party company that's interjecting itself into the payroll process to make the loan. And there are no curbs right now to make sure it's not gouging. So what would preclude an employer just from doing the same thing? I'll give you half your check up front and we'll deduct it. Is this service even necessary?
So I would say that this service is currently being provided in the state. To my understanding, it's been provided probably for about 1.5 to 2 years. And so you're giving individuals access to it. There is as I understand it, there is a public policy debate, right, about whether or not this potentially entraps consumers into a different cycle of debt, right? So you access a certain amount of your paycheck, and then when pay period comes, instead of receiving 100% of your paycheck, you're receiving potentially 40% of your paycheck. So then you have to continue and use this service. I think what I would say is I think when you look at what the CFPB has done, I think that's in permitting this, they have put some very stringent protections in place. So for example, your fee can only be $1 for utilizing this. And your max fee over a 2-week, so you could, over a 2-week period would be $5. So if someone needed theoretically to access it repeatedly, they're capped at a $5 fee, which if you look at sort of the usury, depending on how much someone makes in the usury context, you're probably not exceeding the usury limit there in Georgia. But I think it is it's a policy question for sure. And there is debate on this topic.
Okay. Was there anybody else? Because we need to close this up since we're not going to handle it anyway. Okay. Representative McLean, this is going to be the last one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I raised my hand when he started speaking, but I guess you all didn't see my hand. So, but I guess everybody's probably answered my question, but I have one question for you both. My question is, how many, since you didn't know how many was in that space of what we were talking about the employer loan, how many check cashing places do we have in the state of Georgia?
We have approximately 900 check casher licensees in the state of Georgia.
Approximately.
But one of those licensures may have 2,000 locations, right?
Yes, they could have multiple locations. That's correct.
Okay.
So,
that answer it?
Thank you. Yes, that answered it after you did, Mr. Chairman. So I want to thank you. So there could be roughly 5,000 to 10,000 check cashing places.
Yeah, because I know of one player that I think literally has over 2,000 locations.
Right. So we have, so given that you have a license, then you also have approved branches. How many check casher branches we have in the state of Georgia, I do not know the answer to that. But,
okay.
but it would not surprise me if it is in the thousands.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. That's going to conclude discussion on this bill. And we will get the logistics taken care of.
Chairman Werkheiser, may I ask you what is this bill number?
That's what I was just looking at. Yes, you may. 674.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bo, and for your late night service. Okay. We're going to move to the department bill, and Dwayne, I think you're the senior person here in person. Come play chair. Well, you know what? Hold that thought. Let me do it since so Commissioner Mark Butler, Christina, you going to join him? I'm going to let you be at the podium. I'll be here because all the questions are going to come to you anyway. So, and then of those online, and I'll try to do them in order. Don't think I did that with McLean. My apologies. Just use the raise hand, and Brian here will try to get those in order if you've got a question. So we are moving on to House Bill 532.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the fellow from Revenue's already left. I wanted to publicly thank them for all the help they've given us during this crisis. They've been a fantastic partner, and I know they don't get kudos very often, and so I was going to give them one before he left. They've really helped us actually on one of the subject matters in here that has to do with fraud. I think that was one of the questions that you guys wanted some answers on, and so we've got those answers for you now. I actually had those answers. I couldn't be here last time because of a conflict. We tried. I know some of my staff tried to text Tim to let him know some of these answers, but he wasn't looking at his phone.
Hey, Mark, same thing. Pull that mic close. For some reason, the folks online are having a hard time unless you really close.
I feel like I'm about to eat this thing.
Yeah.
So it's not doing a social distancing here with this mic. So, okay. So anyway, I'll just get right into it. On the, I think Representative McLean asked how many states currently have these investigators. Right now, there are 3: Missouri, Kansas, and California, and several others considering it. And how this all really came about we were actually at the very beginning of this process when we started seeing some possible fraud and started investigating it. We started reaching out to different entities and whatnot. And actually, one of our former members here, that was the attorney for the Northern District, BJ Pack, who's a former representative. I reached out to him, and this was back in April, and he put together a task force for Georgia, which I'm very grateful, and it was fantastic. We got a lot of additional resources through it, but we also learned a lot. When it comes to the organized fraud, generally, your ABCs, your FBIs and things like that, they're only really looking for the very large cases. And then, so you get down to some of the smaller cases, they don't really have the interest nor the manpower to go after them. And the biggest thing that we're concerned about right now has to do with identity theft and fraud, and where somebody has gone and basically pretended to be you. These fraudsters are extraordinarily sophisticated, and I'm talking about like Hollywood kind of sophisticated. They, for all intent, can be you. We've even seen video evidence where they've used some of this new masking technology and put somebody else's face on top of their face, and it looks like a real person when you're videoing with them. It's scary. Scares me to death, that kind of technology. Matter of fact, I was showing some people the other day, there was an article just came out last week where a person pretends to be Tom Cruise. And I swear to God, it looks just like him. And if you didn't tell me that was Tom Cruise, you would swear it sounds just like him, looks just like him. It's not him. So this kind of things we're up against. But like right now, we have about 200,000 fraud stops in our system. And before you freak out, a fraud stop, that could be 24 different types of things. Like, for example, probably the most popular fraud stop there is out there right now is where somebody is collecting unemployment. They go back to work, and then they fail to tell us they've gone back to work, and they don't report their wages, which all that's on the certification that they're supposed to do that. And then we get a report, a new hire report, or we get something from the employer saying that this person's earning wages. That's actually by law considered fraud. Now, these investigators that we want to, have, they're not going to be working on that kind of stuff. We already have a process in place to deal with that. It's called an overpayment. We go to the individual and say, hey, look, we're showing here that you're getting wages from this employer. Is this true? They're supposed to respond, and then we can handle that with them. A lot of times they go, oh, I didn't know, or in some cases they did know and they're just doing it. And our main priority is not to arrest the person. It is to get the money back. Okay. And that's how it's always been. But in this new world that we're dealing with and this new type of fraud with these new types of programs, it has gone up to a whole nother level. Like right now, the ones that we're concerned with, we've got about 15,000 cases right now that we've just learned about in the last couple of months where the fraudsters have used this new PUA system, the new unemployment that just got put in place last March, which, by the way, in my opinion and the opinion of about every other one of my counterparts across the nation, it was almost made to cheat. It's too easy because of how they've got it set up. There's too many things you can self-attest and there's no way to check on it. And these fraudsters have figured it out, and that's where they're pulling off most of the fraud. And this is where you're seeing people getting 1099-Gs at the end of the year, especially it's hitting retirees and things like that, where they're saying, I didn't get any unemployment. And so what is this? And so in order for them to get a corrected 1099-G, there has to be an actual investigation by IRS rules to determine whether or not that it was actually fraud. And so right now what we're having to do is have them file a local police report and then send the fraud to us. We're investigated. And then there's a lot of back and forth. It's very cumbersome. Now, my personal opinion is if the committee, if it's too much heartburn to go this route, then, we'll just keep trying to make it work out. But we're trying to make things more streamlined. And the only fraud that we're actually trying to go after is the actual criminal fraud that we know is going on out there, not the little stuff. The little stuff, we have our own way of handling, how we've always handled it. The main priority on those is just getting them. Of course, it's always getting the money back on all of it. But as you well know, on the criminal stuff, that money's gone. They've spent it, they've sent it somewhere. And so we're really only looking to hire maybe a few people that would be post-certified. You say, well, why don't you be post-certified? Well, we like to have people that have some actual investigative background. And one of the turnoffs to just hiring somebody without being post-certified is the retirement. Matter of fact, when we talked to some other law enforcement agencies, matter of fact, we even went to one and said, we'll fully fund 2 of your positions if you'll just let them be in our building and let us use them. And that's something they just didn't think would fit well. So everybody said, you need to go see Post. Go see Post, talk to them. They'll tell you what to do to handle your situation. So that's where this really came from. They said, this is what you need to do. Revenue does this. Natural Resources does this. This is, if you want to have this kind of thing, you'll be able to, if you want to hire somebody that's actually an investigator that's done some white collar investigations, they'll be able to keep, picking up years in their retirement. And it just gives us a broader audience of people to hire that have better expertise, that also can better work with our federal agencies, our GBI, and local law enforcement. And that's really the main reason why I want to do it. But if it's something that's too much heartburn, we fully understand. It was an idea given to us, and we're taking the advice from law enforcement about what to do to solve this situation. And so this is where this is coming from.
Okay, and I assume you'll take some questions.
Oh, yeah.
Casey Carpenter online.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm probably on a delay. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Commissioner Butler, I just want to commend you on this. I think that's a great idea at the end of the day. I was a little concerned early on, but, as you explained it, I think, we saw such a huge influx of federal money that anytime the money increases, fraud increases. So I commend you for doing it, and I can be fully supportive of that.
Well, thank you.
Representative Kennard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. Did I understand you to say there's 15,000 such fraud cases right now?
These are the ones that have been reported online. We've created a portal at the end of the year. Actually, we've had the portal going all the way back to April for people to report different things. A lot of those are not actually fraud. We get a lot of false reports. But the one thing that really started popping that gives us some really good evidence of identity theft has been here at the end of the year when we started sending out the 1099-Gs, which is where they've received unemployment. And one of the sneaky ways that these individuals use to get stuff is, first of all, they're sending in, a bunch of applications. We catch most of them. And so what happens is the ones that kind of get by, a lot of times it's somebody who's retired. And so they put in all this fake self-employment in the application. And I really don't want to go into too much detail because I'm kind of giving away the playbook here, what they're using. But anyway, in the process, because of how the PUA system is set up, you know, you get to self-attest. And then, you know, we have to go back and try to find the stuff. But depending on how they did it, I mean, some of the stuff they send in looks real. We've even had people send in tax returns, copies of tax returns that look legit, signed, everything. And it's not until we, you know, have time to cross-check it with our partners in revenue that we find out that it's fake. The person's never filed taxes. And so these are cases where an individual has said, hey, I've gotten a 1099-G. I never collected it. And in order for them to get a corrected 1099-G, we actually have to investigate it and deem that it's actual fraud. And it would be good if they could just file one report with us, and that, you know, and that would be the actual police report. And then there's your legal document, and that satisfy the IRS and everybody else. And then hopefully, you know, we'll be able to catch some of these people. I know there have been several people that have been caught in this process and have been arrested.
So there's 15,000 or less of such cases. How many unemployment outstanding claims to be paid do we have as of today?
Okay, if you're talking about people who are actually in the system, right now, you know, we don't have a backlog on processing claims. We're pretty much staying within a 24, 48-hour window processing. But if you apply for unemployment and you apply under a reason other than that you were laid off, say that you said that I got fired, or you said that, well, I quit my job. By rule and law, you have to have a benefit hearing. There's about 60,000 hearings right now, and that sounds like a backlog, but understand we're getting 25,000 claims a week. So that's actually just current workload, because it didn't take you long to get there. And the vast majority of people who are filing are not being laid off. If you look at our warn notices, which is where when employers have to lay off people that they notify us and it's the public can see it, we're not seeing very many warn notices at all. Matter of fact, I think last week we only received 3. And so we're getting a high number of individuals who are, you know, either quitting or they've been fired, or they're trying to apply to get PUA somehow in different ways. And so they're having a hearing. So it doesn't take long to get to 60,000 people in the benefit eligibility hearing when you're getting 25,000 a week. So we're kind of pretty current on that too. And then let's say they go through that benefit hearing and it's deemed that they're not eligible. Let's say that, you know, the employer comes back and says, this person just walked off the job, never came back. We called them, they never would, you know, and so, and it lines up with what they say. They say that they just quit and they don't have a legitimate reason. They don't get unemployment. Of course, now by law, they can appeal that. There's nothing that stops that. Then it goes to an appeals officer. An appeals officer, they hold these hearings, which are like a court case. And so the employer is notified, they're notified. This hearing officer, which is somebody who typically has at least a minimum of 3 years experience, if not a law background, an HR background, and they do cross-examine everything just like a regular court case and try to gather the evidence and go, okay, according to the evidence, this person either is going to be approved or not approved. All right. So, and right now about 77% of the cases we're seeing that are being appealed are being upheld from the previous decision. So in a lot of cases, you know, I think it was like 77% are like still staying denied. And so even though they're in there and they have a claim, they're still not going to get paid because they're denied. Now they can appeal again. And this goes to the review board, which actually that gets out of our purview. We have no oversight over the review board. They're appointed by the governor. They're totally autonomous. They can review the case. They decide if the stuff that was presented was good, and they can up or down it. If they decide, you know, we believe that this was not handled properly, we're going to approve it, then they can approve it. They say, yeah, it's fine, then they uphold it. And then that person can actually appeal one more time. And this time it goes to Superior Court. Obviously, we have no control over that either. And so, I mean, you know, they can appeal this thing forever. And so once it gets to Superior Court, right now, a lot of the courts not being open and the backlog they have because of other cases, you know, we don't know when those are going to be heard, but none of that we can change. That's all black letter law, as a judge would say.
Mr. Chair, may I have one more question? Say yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So with this volume of hearings and unpaid claims, and because I'm hearing from a lot of my constituents, and I know a lot of my colleagues are, Would it be better to divert all possible resources to hearings rather than fraud investigation?
Well, there's two separate subjects. We already are adding more people. We've added a lot of hearing officers. Look, during this whole entire process, we've added 500 additional employees. That's a 50% increase of where we were this same time last year. That's a phenomenal feat, by the way, because just a basic person that does the basic work for us, it just does, the process and the claims, it takes 3 months of supervised training to train one person. During the last recession, it took the Department of Labor 3 years to get up to 2,000 people, and we're at 1,500 in less than 9 months. So that's, we are hiring at an extremely accelerated clip. This subject of fraud is totally different. And just because somebody has, by the way, just because somebody has contacted you and says they haven't gotten paid, it doesn't mean they're also always telling you the truth. I've got a pocket full of people right now on my phone where I send to one person that I'm using now. I actually gave y'all my best person that I use. They're no longer working for me. They're working for y'all now. And I had somebody just the other day that was like, my payment stopped for no reasons. Why did my payment stop? Y'all have done something wrong with my claim. And so when we investigated it, coming to find out, they had 3 jobs in the fourth quarter and had not reported any of those jobs or any of that income. Not only did their payments going to stop, but now they owe us money because for the most part of the fourth quarter, we were paying them unemployment and they were earning wages at the exact same time and not reporting it. And on the weekly certifications, it says, have you gone back to work? Yes or no? How much money did you make? Fill in this blank. And they're skipping that. They're putting no and filling none of that in. That's actually a case of fraud right there. But we're not looking to prosecute those kind of people. We're looking to get the money back.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna call on Bonner real quick for a little cleanup. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think as a procedural matter, it may be appropriate to make a motion to take House Bill 532 off the table.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Say aye. Okay, all opposed, say no. All right, continue. Next, I think we had Representative McLean for a question.
Yes, first I want to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you, Commissioner, for all you've been trying to do. I know it was Herculon because of the way things happen to you. My only concern was I know that and thanks for getting back with those 3 states too. I just wonder did the PUA, was that the reason those 3 other states did this because of the fraud of the PUA, or was this something they've had already and there's something they've already had before?
No, these states have had these in place. The first one I knew about Missouri a long time ago because we've actually helped Missouri with some fraud cases in the past with some stuff the person that was committing the fraud was actually located in Georgia. And we helped them connect with some local law enforcement and also with our GBI back in the day.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I want to ask about the Scooby, which is the Southeast Consortium Unemployment Benefits Initiative, the 50 million. Did we receive those funds?
I'm sorry. I'll be honest with you. I'm hard of hearing. And
okay.
The
Scooby, SCUBI, which stands for Southeastern Consortium Unemployment Benefits Initiative. They gave us some money for a new computer program. Did we receive those funds? Did that help any?
Are you talking about the consortium that was done years ago where we were in with North and South Carolina? Yeah, we worked with them for years. That program, that particular project didn't work out for us. And I can go into you offline about that because I don't want to throw any companies under the bus on this, but we did receive some money. We did use that money and we did get somewhere. But at the end, the contract got really messy. We kept getting outvoted by the other 2 states. Some really bad decisions were made. And we decided not to finish up with that particular company because they basically wanted almost as much to finish the project with them as we'd already paid them. And so we finished it up ourselves for a whole lot less. But yeah, we did. And they're talking about bringing some of that back. I don't know why, because right now, because of the high level of claims we're getting, that's how we're paid, is the number of claims. Our federal money has increased exponentially. And how that's set up, a lot of people don't know this, but like if you don't spend certain amounts of money on certain things by certain times, you actually have additional years to spend that. And one of the things you can spend them on is technology. And so we should be good for at least, I don't know, probably 2-3 years on some of that. But they're also talking about, right, matter of fact, we have a conference call with one of our congressional delegation to talk about some new initiatives in Washington about technology and UI systems. We are actually in pretty good shape. Our issue right now is the constant changes. Like every time you hear of an extension or them coming in and redoing something in unemployment, what you don't hear in the news reports is usually there's a whole bunch of rule changes and going back and redoing things that you've already done because they've changed their mind. And so like we'll get to one point and go, okay, we've got this finished, we're good. And then something will pass and they go, okay, no, wait a minute, we want you to redo that. Then you have to go back and redo everything and look at everything again. Just like back in December. I mean, they went back and I don't know why they did the extensions the way they did it. They've never done them that way. But instead of just giving people the extra weeks, they said, we're going to give you extra weeks, but even if you've run out like in October, we're going to ignore all those times that you've asked for money and you can only get money going forward starting in January. And that was a bear to program. I don't know why they did it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner. Do appreciate you, and we'll talk offline about that and that consortium. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Hey, and our policy analyst, Brian, is coming. If you want to speak to either this bill or Todd's bill, just please put your name on that. Casey, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, sir. Just
Okay.
one quick question. Since we got the commissioner boxed in right now, I figured I'd go ahead and get a question out as well. On the credit cards that were shipped out for everyone to collect on their benefits, is there an audit process on that at the end of the year where you guys can track how many cards were shipped that were never accessed, and who holds those funds? Is it the state that holds those funds, or is it the credit card company that you outsource it to? Because I know I had a couple of employees that cards got lost in the mail and it was a bear to get it moved over. So I have a feeling there's a lot of cards out there in circulation that aren't getting used. And I just kind of want to understand what we're doing. How do we account for those funds and who controls them, et cetera?
That's a great question, because those accounts are really not credit. I mean, obviously they look like a credit card, but it's really a debit card, and it's basically a bank account. It's for those individuals who don't have access to a bank account or who cannot get a bank account, and that's why we do those. It's actually much better than the old system of sending out a check, because if you get a check and you don't have a checking account or a bank account, it's hard to cash that. So we went to that system. All the states have pretty much done this. And so what happens is on the lost ones, as soon as we get a report that it's lost, the money gets flipped over to a new card. But we do have a lot of cards that have been sent back. And through this process, it used to be something that we could handle with somebody just calling the company and then they taking it off and they send it to us. But because of the volume that we're dealing with now, everything that used to be like 10 times a month is now 10,000 times a month. And that's not an exaggeration. What we have now is they've developed a process to where we have people in our finance section who basically take those cards every day and they kind of virtually swipe them. And then that money goes back into the trust fund. But that money is actually technically still in that person's name in the account in their name tied to their Social Security until that gets swiped back into our account. And then we can say they've paid us back. And so that's how that works. But yes, we do keep up with all of those. And after a certain amount of time, if those cards are not accessed and never reported, then it automatically reverts back to us.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer.
All right, Representative Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Commissioner Butler, for being here and taking the time to have some of these questions answered. Thanks especially for answering Representative Carpenter's question on that, because it, kind of talks in the Capitol made it seem that these are just kind of credit cards floating around, but this is actually money that they've already earned, and it's on that. And so if they access it, great. If not, that's good to know that it does at least come back into the system. I was kind of going back, I know with respect to these hearings, to get 25,000 hearings a week is, pretty substantial. I know that for those 15,000 fraud cases that are just out there, the ones that you know about, give or take, how long does it take for these cases to run through the hearing process? I know individuals vary, but I think overall you might be able to have some type of average in terms of cases being moved from the point that you receive them to the point that go to get payout.
Okay, are we talking about the fraud cases or the appeals cases?
Yeah, the unemployment cases.
Well, it just depends. If somebody is just laid off, like where the boss, your boss comes to you and says, we can no longer use you anymore because, we're having to cut back. Those cases are getting paid out extremely fast because what they do is they go in, they self-attest, I was laid off, and then we pretty much start paying them within a few weeks. Now, we have had a lot of cases where people have said that, and then the employer comes back and says, no, I didn't lay that person off. I fired them. I mean, they stole from me. What are you doing paying them? They get mad at me. And I'm like, well, they told me up front that they were laid off. And so, so a lot of this happens on the honesty factor, okay? But now if you start off saying, okay, I was not laid off for that reason. I was laid off because I was fired. I was laid off because I just quit my job. Like I had one the other day, it said, she was wondering how come she hadn't got paid, and she was lined up for a hearing, and I was like, well, what did she say on her explanation? And she says, I've told y'all before and I'm not telling you again. And that was her explanation. And I'm like, well, no, you have to tell us. And so somebody has to call that person and goes, okay, what was the reason for your separation? Why did you quit? Because there are some ways in which you can quit your job and possibly get unemployment. Now that's a very small percentage, but legally there are possibilities. And so we have to investigate that. And so that takes, fact finding, talking to the person. Then you have to talk to the employer to see if you can back up what the person is saying. And so, some of these happen very quickly. Some of them take a while. It depends on how complicated the cases are trying to prove. Or you have individuals who say they've quit for example, like if you quit for a COVID reason, because let's say you have lupus and you work in a very public atmosphere and you're very high risk. Okay. And so one of the requirements you have to have for that, which may be changing, by the way, with some new rules that they're talking about in DC, but they have to provide us proof from the doctor. And so a lot of times they don't do that, even though they can upload it right into their file. And so we had to call them and go, okay, you need to go to your doctor and just get a letter from them saying, hey, this person doesn't need to be in their public facing job because and that's all you got to do. And then once you do that, boom, we can switch you to PUA and get you going. And sometimes that takes a while too, because we're waiting on them to provide us the proof before we can set them up on PUA. And then we also have a lot of people that actually have been approved and they never request their weeks of payment, which has been a challenge. We've never had this type of challenge with that, because in the past, you might see 5% of cases like that where somebody's been approved and they never asked for a payment. And so we didn't really think anything of it, but now we actually have had to develop, because the number had gotten so big, a system to where every so often an email will go out on those particular ones and say, hey, is there any, just reminding you have an approved case, but you need to request your weeks. And that number will change a little bit, but a lot of them, because you'll have some people that will go and apply like the day they get let go. Okay. And then they'll get really lucky and find another job in like a day or so. And so then they never do anything with it, but the case is still sitting there. And believe it or not, right now, I think we've got 100,000 cases sitting out there right now that are approved and have never been requested. And that sounds like a big number, but when you talk about, 2 million that are out there that are in that kind of category, then that's actually back to your 5%, which is what we normally see. It's just the numbers are so much bigger than what we're used to seeing.
I think that's the follow. I guess that's I think we're all kind of wrestling with that. I guess as a follow-up, especially to my, my colleague, Representative Pastor Kennard, is that we're looking at, how do you juxtapose, focusing on trying to get fraud investigators for around basically 15,000 cases, when by and large, the majority of what you're seeing with respect to the problems of making sure that either you're having a clear payout where the person there is entitled to those benefits, or someone who may not be, by and large, this is dealing really with processing the cases, that they need to be processed efficiently and expediently. If you're having 25,000 hearings a week, and and you're looking at two different types of, let's say, fraud. And I mean, I've been a criminal arrest warrant officer, so I know how to identify what's fraud, and what's maybe just ignorant negligence. So, but if you're having where you actually are having, more of a focus on getting enough employees in there for that 3 months of training for them to be able to identify these cases, you got a faster process through which you can maybe at the end of that be able to say, hey, well, now that 15,000 of cases out of the total 100,000 that we're getting in a month's time, that are potentially fraud. Well, hey, now we can actually get those post-certified officers to go and investigate, so that if there are cases of fraud, that we can hold them accountable. But it's just, I think that's what we're all kind of looking at is, if you get this huge swath of people that are actually great, their cases aren't sitting there languishing because they haven't been taken. No, they're just filled up in hearings the whole time. And if there's no real set time through which they can get out of that hearing, then how will you ever get clearly to understand who was actually being negligible, or where's their fraud enough to substantiate allowing for these post-certified investigators to go and deep dive? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, but I just want to reassure you that this is two different parts of the department. We're trying to add this on to help and actually alleviate some of the work on some of the people that's doing what you want to do onto somebody else that has expertise in it. It actually makes the process more efficient to go this route. And we're already hiring as many people as physically and humanly can. Hiring and training during a pandemic has been extraordinarily challenging, because you do have to have basically one-on-one supervision for the new hires, because this stuff is extraordinarily complicated, all the different rules and regulations, not to mention the fact of all the new rules and regulations that we've been handed by all these new programs, some of which go counter to regular unemployment. Like PUA has some things in it which are the exact opposite of what we do in regular unemployment. And somebody just coming off the street, I mean, it's just their brain just about explodes, because this stuff goes back and forth, and it takes them a while to get used to it and learn it and figure it out. But those people you're talking about coming off the street, the ones that service specialists, they're just doing the initial processing, like coming in and taking a look. Okay, where does this need to go? Okay, this person got laid off, boom, pay them. Oh, this person's going to need a hearing and needs to go here. Oh, this is a duplicate claim. This person has filed 6 claims last week, and we need to erase this one, because if we don't erase this one, it's actually going to hold them up. Those types of things. And so, the hearing officers, those are in a whole different category. You're not getting very many of those off the street. We've been trying, but that's very hard to find, because you're talking about somebody with a law background, HR background. And in this pandemic, not too many of those individuals actually lost their job, if you take a look at the numbers. And so we're actually, just like we were this time last year, in the same type of hiring situation, extraordinarily competitive going after that type of talent. So, and also one thing I will tell you that we have seen in some of the cases you guys have sent over, we have a lot of people who say they're waiting for a hearing and they've never appealed. And so then when we get it, y'all, which we really appreciate you helping us, when you reach out to us and they say, well, I'm waiting for my appeal hearing, and then we go and look and they've never filed an appeal. So then we contact them and going, you need to file an appeal. You've never filed one. That's why you're waiting. Now, we usually, if we take a look and we can see that it was a mistake, we don't put them at the back of the line. We help you out and we push them up. All right. Because we see that it was an issue, it was a mistake that they did not file the appeal, or they filed it incorrectly, or whatever.
Oh, thank you. And I think that's the best part is, I guess, I know, have you all, just because, and maybe to even make it even lighter, I know sometimes we talk about P3s, and that these, public-private partnerships that in order to lessen the burden on your office, have you been able to maybe, contract with others who might be able to help with that processing level, just so that you can focus in on more of these dire cases of fraud?
Okay, well, I'll tell you this. Yes, we have, and they do help us in the process. They take some of the administrative burden off of us. Contractors cannot make decisions legally. That's federal law, but they can, they did lift some rules to allow them to do some fact finding, things like that. So yes, we do have a lot of temps that we have hired with different, I think we're using 4 or 5 temp companies right now because not one can't get us enough people. We also have a lot of contractors on the IT side. I think we've already added 50 programmers. And if you know anything about programmers, they don't come cheap, even through contracts. And we're about to add 50 more. We actually had to create some more space in order to put them because of all these new things that they keep throwing at us. It takes a lot of programmers to get this stuff done. And so, yes, absolutely. And also like some of the, I don't know if you know this, but one of the things that has really caused some issues and when they passed the CARES Continuation Act back in December, one of the things in that bill is they wanted us to go back and reaffirm everybody's identity in PUA again. You know how many people that is?
Yeah, I'm sure.
100,000 people. Okay. And we couldn't do all that ourselves. And so luckily we were prepared. All the states have put together actually a system that can run them through and do a high level check. And that gets most of them approved, saying, yes, this is who they say are. But then if they don't score high enough and it looks a little fishy, then we have a contractor that's basically military grade that a lot of the states are using. There's about 2 or 3 companies that do this. And they go, and they're the ones that identify the people using the weird video mask thing. Because sometimes, like if they'll go through the checks, and if you keep failing stuff, they'll go, all right, we need to talk to you. Okay. And then they'll go up on the video. Then you're like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this video. And they have obviously very, very sophisticated equipment. And they go, that's not real. They've even showed us, they showed us one guy that had imitated 12 different people. But in this case, he was using his own face, but he had driver's license, social security cards, and they looked legit. And it was the same guy, because you see that, because this time his name is this time his name is this. And they actually finally, and this guy was very sophisticated, they finally figured out he wasn't even in the States. This guy was overseas. And so no telling what government is funding his operation, but we're dealing with some of that too. But thankfully we have contractors that have that level of sophistication that help us identify those.
Yeah, thanks for answering the question, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for your patience. Before Representative Thomas, you're going to be next, but Chairman Todd is going to be in preparations for a while. He has asked that we move his bill to tomorrow, and it will probably be the only bill on tomorrow. So I apologize for those that came for that. But the good news is he hopefully will have a sub. And the second we get that, Vanessa, who's been on top of all this stuff, will get that out to all the interested parties, okay? My apologies for that. But like I said, this whole day and this whole week is going to be very fluid. Okay, with that, thanks for your patience. Representative Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. This is a daunting experience for all of our constituents and legislators, and I'm sure you as well. As it relates to fraud, we've had a lot of constituents that have received an approval letter, but with zero monies. Does that have anything to do with the fraud?
Well, no, make sure that they're reading the letter correctly. One of the things that we've seen that pop up the most is they get the monetary determination letter first, okay? Now, the monetary determination letter is not an approval letter, but a lot of people are reading like the first few sentences and go, oh, look, I was approved for $300 or whatever, but they don't read the rest of it, which says, if you get final approval for your unemployment case, this is the amount you're going to be receiving, not that you are going to receive that. And so sometimes that's what they're reading and thinking that they've been approved. So make sure that's not, and of course, because of how many times we've seen this happen, they've actually are going back and changing the letter to have like bold type, this is not an approval letter, which even though it says it in the body, but some people don't want to read because it's like this long, all the stuff that's on there that we have to notify somebody of. But now if it shows no amount,
000.
okay, then that's definitely not an approval letter. That's basically showing that they didn't have any wages reported, okay? Now, we have had an issue, and this was really bad during July and August, and we're gonna blame it on some of the Facebook help sites, because a lot of them are saying, if you fill out your unemployment application a certain way, you'll get approved for PUA faster. And one of the things they were telling people was leave all of the stuff blank where you put your income in and where you put your workplace in, and that'll get you denied and get your, that's not true. That actually tremendously slows you down, because that means instead of the system recognizing this, now it goes into a queue and a person has to physically look over it, look and see what you put in, and then try to get in touch with you. And hopefully you put your right number in there and then talk to you and find out what it is. Then it goes through a process of trying to do wage investigation and that kind of stuff. But we had almost 500,000 people attempt that between July and August, which really backed things up for about 2 months, because you had this big swath of cases that came in, all filled out just like that. And we kind of tracked it down to some bad advice people were reading on some of these things. And that's, it's real simple. Just follow directions on the application. Where did you work? And it doesn't say just W-2. It says any work. Put it all down there.
Mhm.
Because how you get on PUA is if you put down 3 jobs and they're all 1099, and then you upload your stuff, we know you're PUA. And so we need to deny you for regular unemployment because you don't qualify because you don't have a W-2 job, and we get you into PUA and boom. And I've seen people who have gone through the PUA process, like both applications, and get approved within a month, which that's, that process is very, very manual for PUA because of all the stuff that you have to send us and that a person has to read, because we don't have your 1099 information. We don't know anything about those self-employment jobs because you never reported it to us.
Right. I mean, and I know you're saying just fill out the process and it should go through, but we just have tons of constituents across the state that believe that they are filling out the proper forms and doing what they're supposed to do, and they don't hear anything back. But I know we're here about fraud. So just as it relates to fraud, because you talked about there may be some unintentional and intentional fraud, right? Is there a list of maybe some of the unintentional fraud that may be going on that constituents are just not in tune with and didn't mean to do that, and something that can be easily corrected that we can share with constituents?
Well, the number one thing we're seeing right now, like I said earlier, was that and this, let me make it clear, this is not the people we're looking to go, like, this is not what we're looking to go criminal wise, okay? The biggest thing we're seeing right now, and this is technically fraud by federal and state rule, is if somebody is on unemployment, it doesn't matter if you're on PUA, regular unemployment, any of the extensions, and let's say you decide you want to go back to work, or you get a part-time job, all right? Let's say you make more than what we're letting you accept plus your benefit, and you don't report that you've gone back to work to us, which is on this weekly certification. And if you don't report your income, no matter how big or small it is, you have to report it. If you don't do those 2 things, and then it come to find out that we paid you more than we were supposed to, technically that's fraud. Now, we're not looking to hurt anybody on that. But if we have overpaid you, we need that money back. And we usually work with people, especially if becomes a financial hardship. And then, I know in the past when we've had some large overpayments where somebody, worked a whole quarter and got paid a whole lot, and then they kind of find out they shouldn't have got any unemployment because they didn't report it to us. And let's say they owe us, a couple $1,000s. They go, well, I don't have it. Then we work out a payment for them. But now, that's an extreme case. But that's the most common thing that we see. Now, those 15,000 cases I was telling you about, those are where somebody has come to us and saying, hey, I got a 1099-G. It says I received $18,000 in unemployment. I've been retired for 5 years and I haven't worked in 5 years. And so that needs to be investigated. We need to see what's going on with that because that person needs to have that cleared up for their own sake.
Right, and I've had several constituents of that, so that's my last question. What should they be doing if they found out that someone has been getting benefits under their name?
Two things. Since like April, we've had an online fraud reporting system. Specifically for 1099-G, we added an additional feature and they can go on there and they actually, I believe it's the very last box now, they can click 1099-G and they need to fill all that out. That gets them in the queue to be investigated. And probably they need to go ahead and file a police report too. And I would also strongly suggest they try to figure out a way to monitor their credit. The cheapest way to do it, and I don't mean to plug this, and I know it's out there on the internet, but I personally, and this is not an endorsement, but I use Credit Karma because it's free. That way I can see if anybody applies for anything in my name, because I've had my identity in the past has been messed with and stolen. I've had issues with credit cards coming up in my name. And so I know what it's like, and it's a pain. It is an absolute pain to fix all that once it happens. It is aggravating, and the people that do this, I can't stand because it's so much stuff you have to unwind. And this stuff right here with the 1099-Gs, dealing with the IRS, that's going to be a nightmare for those people. So we won't be able to clear it up as quickly as we can.
Well, it is a nightmare.
It
We
is.
have
It
several
absolutely-
cases of this. What is the time frame on something like this? Because it's a trickle down effect in their lives and they're already
Oh, yeah.
suffering. Yeah, so.
That's why we need to, that's why we want to go this route, because I mean, we would like to have maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 at the most actual, legal investigators post-cert, and then they're going to have, as they build up a staff to be able to do this, and some of it's going to be temps, because we know at the end of this, we're not going to need all those people, right? And so they'll go up and do research. But the more that we can get this thing going, the quicker, then the faster that we can clear some of these cases. But we're already working those cases. But right now, it's kind of a convoluted process because, let's say like you filed a police report in Tifton, Georgia, and your identity was stolen. All right, and then you notified us. We're working on that. And then at some point, we're going to be having to flip back down there and talk to them and kind of go, okay, this is what we found out. And then you'll have some paperwork that says, okay, this was not me, it was somebody else, because you need to keep that in case something comes up in the future. And then we can report to the IRS, this is what we found out, it is fraud, and then you get a correct 1099-G. And depending on how complicated it is, it can take a little while, because here's something, I know I'm going kind of long, but we've actually had several cases where people have reported fraud saying that they didn't get the money and they want us to send them the money again because somebody hacked their account or stole their money. And then when we investigated it, it was actually them. They had another account and they sent the money to another account and said, oh, I never got the money. Somebody hacked my account. And then when we subpoenaed the bank or whomever they sent it to, it came back and it was that person. And you're like,
Right.
whoa.
I
So that's
mean,
why we have to investigate them all.
Right, and I understand, but when you talk about fraud, where is that into relationship in numbers of who just has a valid claim that is just not being paid for whatever reason?
If you have a valid claim, you're getting paid. A lot of times you're being told that, oh, I've been approved, and it's not. If you truly have a valid claim and you have not received payment, most likely what has happened is you haven't requested your weeks. I had one just the other day that a guy that I know sent me. He goes, hey, I got a friend and he says he hasn't been paid since July. And I'm like, he says he's approved. I said, okay, let's see if he really was. He had never requested 1 week. He's probably been sent like 3 or 4 emails asking him with the instructions, how to ask for your money, and just ignored him and never did it.
And that could be happening. I just don't think that may be the case of the ones that are sending us emails. I think
There's 100,000 people right now that are approved for benefits who have never requested 1 payment. I am sending them letters, and I'm talking up here right now. Thank you.
Yeah, y'all,
Okay. Yes, this is a nightmare.
okay.
Just for everybody involved. I thank you, Chairman. I did just have one little
Okay,
last
but
question.
remember, we are hearing the bill, and that we know the department's overwhelmed, so just stick to the bill.
And
Okay.
and I've been sticking to the
Okay.
bill with
Yeah.
fraud. Do you have some type of date where this fraud, you're alleviating the fraud? You're saying that you have the 50 IT that's working, you're going to bring in 50 more. Do you have some type of
Oh,
date?
no, I've got closer probably to 125 people total in IT. I was saying we had added 50 to what we already had because we had about 75 on staff developers because we were already redoing a lot of our system stuff and coming up with some new features when all this started. But we didn't have enough money to really hire a lot of people because, you know, our budget has not been one of the ones that's been taken care of over the last 10 years. And so when all this new money started coming in, then, hey, you know, we can go out, we can hire 50 more developers because these, you know, these are not cheap. I mean, you know, you send these folks $120,000 a year.
I understand. I understand the financial impact on it, and I understand the financial impact on the constituents is what I'm concerned about. So thank you for your time.
Okay, Representative Kirby online.
All right, I'm unmuted. Got me now?
Go ahead.
Hello?
You're
All right.
on.
Hey, Commissioner, appreciate you. All right, Commissioner, appreciate you being here. I can tell you're holding your ear. I'll speak a little louder, but yeah, I'll be the first to say the sheer volume you've all have endured over this COVID pandemic. You've really done yeoman's work to do everything you have done. As I told somebody else the other day, though, but if you're the one person waiting on your money, you're not happy. So we understand that. That's hopefully a small percentage. But my question is, if the employees and the employers are both doing what they're supposed to be doing, that's what you were talking about originally when you said those claims are getting processed in 24 to 48 hours, correct?
It depends. If you're talking about an employer file claim, yes, those do go by very quickly because the employer's already self-attested and all the stuff that we send out and ask for. And I know that you and I have had conversations, and I know that y'all do that. And that is the fastest process in America to go that route. And we're one of the very few states that actually has that process. But then in a normal course, like let's say somebody puts down that they're laid off, and then we go through that, we still have to request from the employer to back that up. As long as they send us to us timely, then that person can probably start receiving payments within 14 to 21 days, depending on how long the employer takes to send us stuff. But no, they typically, if you get laid off for no fault of your own, you're getting paid fairly quickly in a couple of weeks. But now if the employer comes back and starts arguing, then it gets into a whole nother process.
Well, I can't remember the form number right off the top of my head, the standard Department of Labor form that we issue to everybody that when they separate their employment here, either, you know, whether it's a COVID RIF or just a termination for cause, are most of those forms required when they apply if it's not one that we're doing for them?
Well, yes, an employer is supposed to fill that out. Yes. And we do have electronic means of doing that now that we've had for several years. That actually makes the process quicker. And one of the good things during the pandemic is we've gotten a lot more employers have adopted the electronic means than we had before. The adoption rate went up astronomically because it's so much faster. It's called SIDES. It's something we worked on with USDOL years ago and has implemented, and they've worked with us to improve that system. But that way the employer can, when they get the notification from us, they can go online, fill out the reasons, boom, we have it instantly. It goes straight into the person's file. So that way it can't get lost in the mail. And that system actually works great.
Yes, it does. I agree. The electronic stuff is working wonderful. It's really a godsend for employers through this pandemic we've had to deal with. And I wish that more people would take advantage of it. So, but no, that's the only questions I've got. I know I've still got employees that haven't answered the questions, the identity verification, things like that. We help them through that, but it's, when it comes down to it, they still got to respond to you when you send them those letters out. And when they don't do it, it's not a lot I can do on your end or you can do on either one of us can do. So thank you for being here.
Okay. Hey, we've got still lights lit up. We got people signed up. We need to be out of this room in 13 minutes. Would like to take action on this. If we'll say in the last 3 minutes before at 11:27. So just keep that in mind, be respectful that other people want to talk. Kennard, is your hand still raised or is that from previous? Okay. Got a
From
couple
previous.
people, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Chairman, and to the committee. I'll try and be as fast as possible. I've had, as many of you have had, constituents to contact you on a variety of reasons concerning the Department of Labor. I've actually had a constituent who received money on a card and has spent over 3 to 4 months trying to get in touch with the Department of Labor to give that money back because she was saying that she never applied for any benefits and did not understand why benefits was coming to her. Not to mention the number of people that we have had, and I would say is probably going to end up being a tsunami of complaints dealing with the 1099s. Either they have not received that amount of money that is on the 1099, or the 1099 that came is something that they never applied for. Now, I know that we all empathize with our commissioner for him to have to endure this number of claims, over 4.5 million. I mean, he needs prayer just to deal with what he's having to deal with. But many of us as elected officials has also had to deal with the number of complaints that have come to our office. I ask that many of you, as I stated before, examine the computer program that we have paid for. The 2 million that was allocated for fraud from the 100 million that the federal government allocated. How was that money spent? What was it spent on? Did it help eliminate any of this backlog or identify the people who are causing the fraud? Of the SCUBA, over $50 million was allocated with that, which was supposed to provide a new computer system for the cooperative that was formed. I heard that it was, we decided not to go full force with that, but if you would look at the information that was provided, it was stated that we were supposed to go online in 2018, 2019. So exactly when did we find out after the 50 million that this program did not work? And so we need an update on that. Of the 4.5 million, when it comes to fraud, if the employer, a third of those claims were actually put in by the employer, I'm sure the employers would not go through the trouble of putting in claims that were not valid. So if a third of that was put in by the employer, of that third, it is stated that the people received at least one payment. After the one payment, we received a number of complaints that after 1 to 3 payments, the account number was changed and that money was diverted. So if the people are, our constituents are unable to get in touch with the Department of Labor, how do they contest this issue of fraud if they have been spending from 3 to 6 months trying to say, this is fraud, it should not be on my name or under my name? What recourse will these constituents have? There are a number of complaints, a number of valid claims that were not paid. And now we're getting into the 1099, which is the tax form. We have a serious problem on our hands. And if we do not really examine all that is involved in this, I'm afraid that we're going to have, like I said, a tsunami of problems and complaints. If you have any questions, I answer. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm gonna let Mark, before you come back up, go ahead. Let's have Representative Schofield, and then we'll finish with Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I have two quick questions. And the first question comes to my constituents that have lost their housing. They're sleeping in their cars. Their kids can't go to school because they haven't received their benefits. And it's a simple question. When are the doors and the offices of the Department of Labor going to be open? And then the second question I'm going to have relates to the Georgia Code section 34-8-72 that says the commissioner shall appoint a state advisory council and may appoint local and industry council. Are these councils active?
Okay, thank you. Commissioner?
Okay, well, there were several things in there. I'll talk about Scooby. I thought I covered it in the thing, but the Scooby project in Georgia's eyes was a failure, okay? It just did not work. The money was spent and it was used. Our regular UI system is fairly modern. We have outperformed more modern systems. The best example I can give you right now, and I'm just talking about regular UI, I think there's some things that people don't understand about what we've been dealing with. And when you're speaking from an area you don't understand, it's easy to throw up criticisms. And so, for example, Florida below us has a much newer system that was built, and I'm not going to name the name because I'm not here to throw anybody down. We have friends that work for this company. A very large company built their system. It is way more modern than ours. Okay, if you will go and spend some time and just Google Florida unemployment, you will see the nightmare that they had down there. People couldn't get claims filed. They couldn't do anything. It was an absolute train wreck. Right now, their pay rate for the entire time that we've been in this to pay people within 21 days is only sitting around about, I think, 35 or 36%. We are like at 76% and within the first 21 days, first payment when somebody applies. Now, by the way, we're not in control of everything on first payments because if somebody forgets to ask for their payments and they wait 3 months and then ask for them, that actually counts against our timeliness, and we have no control over that. And we've had a lot of that. But even with all that being considered, there is no state in front of us that is even approaching our size that is at our percentage of paying within 21 days. The closest state has done 1.2 million fewer claims. We have done more claims than the first 7 that are in the spots 1 through 7. And when she talks about people who have a valid claim have never been paid, well, it's probably they've never requested. If they don't request their payments, they're not going to get it. The fraud money is being spent on those companies that I told you about, those contractors that are having to verify people's identities. All the money is going where it's supposed to be going.
Okay, and so a couple of those valid questions, but did not relate to the bill. So I'm going to ask if what the committee wants to do. Is there anybody? All right, Representative Bonner, what number are you? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to offer a motion of do pass, and then I do have an amendment to offer.
Okay. Okay, got a second. But before we vote on that, then we can hear your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to amend the bill to remove the lines in section 1, I believe it's 15 through 18, related to the investigators.
I second that motion.
Okay. So we're gonna vote on the motion first, and then we'll vote on the bill. All those in favor of the motion, basically removing section 1, and our very astute Legislative Counsel Sean Marie has a sub prepared just in case we needed it, because several people have mentioned that. So we can move on that pretty quick. So all those in favor of the amendment,
Aye.
Wait, hold on. Time out. We're not voting. Okay,
Just for clarification, we would also need to remove language from the title at lines 3 through 5, and then we would renumber the sections, just letting the
okay.
committee
And
members know
you've
that.
already got all that.
Right, but that also makes a different change.
Okay.
Do you want me to discuss that?
Hey, yeah, Josh, if you are amenable to, Sean Marie can accomplish what you want, but in a little bit different manner, and she's about to explain that. Without removing those lines. Go ahead.
I need to talk to you offline.
Okay. Give us 2 seconds. Okay. Sean Marie's going to explain the change. And Josh, if you don't mind, listen to that, and if you'll amend your motion to what she's about to explain.
So in addition to that, the other change that was requested by the department for your consideration that the chairman has asked for me to speak to is on line 41. That line currently says waive work search reporting requirements so as not to create a conformity issue with federal law. And in consultation with the department, it was determined that maybe perhaps better language to effectuate that provision would be to change so as not to accept when such waiver would, such that if you make that change, that the lines 41 and 42 would then read, waive work search reporting requirements, except when such waiver would create a conformity issue with federal law.
Okay, so she's basically just making sure that we're shored up with federal law, but it removes the provision that you want. So you want to reset your motion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I would like to amend my motion.
And I'll take back my second before he can amend his motion, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'll amend that motion in accordance with Legislative Council's review.
And I'll
Kane? Okay, so we have a first and a second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. On the bill as substituted by the committee, need a motion. Well, we already had a motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion carries as substituted by committee. Thank you all very much. We're adjourned.
Love you guys.
See ya.
See y'all later.